Sorry, guys. Had some trouble as far as the connection is concerned. It looks like a good amount of folks was able to log back on. Just waiting for Miss Brittany Thomas to log on, and of course, once again, my name is Gavin Webb, producer and co-creator of STOOP55. Today we're talking about mental health wellness during the COVID-19 pandemic. If you can't see me, if you can't hear me, please let me know. I feel like, the bandwidth during the evening times isn't the best. Everybody's hopping on live, but we gonna keep it moving. Again, if you don't already know, we are still raising funds for Brooklyn Hospital. A little bit less than $100 short of our goal of $2,000 for the production of N95 masks to Brooklyn Hospital medical workers. Again, just waiting for Brittany Thomas to hop back on. Subject matter for today is mental health and awareness, which is very important when it comes to the Black community. A little bit taboo as of late, but we're gonna try to make that. All right. Hey.
All righty, I think we're good this time.
Yeah. I don't know. It was looking like I had a poor connection on my side, but you know what? We're gonna just keep on moving. And apologies, but please, if you can tell the difference or explain the difference between a psychiatrist and a licensed social clinical worker like yourself for the folks.
Right. Yeah, sure thing. So a psychiatrist is if someone is dealing with severe, if someone is dealing with mental illness and they need medication to manage it or treat it, they would see a psychiatrist.
Okay.
So if some of my, clients, I'll make a referral to a psychiatrist if I find that medication will be most beneficial for them, in addition to talk therapy. As a licensed clinical social worker, I'm trained in psychotherapy. So that's talk therapy, that's doing, behavioral and cognitive changes, and providing coping skills for my clients and like their day-to-day stressors.
Okay, nice. So, you do a lot of talk therapy, you mentioned. As
Mm-hmm.
far as like going on right now, obviously you can't be in the room with your patients. How is
Mm-hmm.
it talking to them now? Are you Skyping them? Are you talking on the phone?
So for some of my clients, they do prefer audio sessions and I will call on the phone. But for most of them, I'm actually doing video sessions. I use a HIPAA compliant platform. So the platform I use is called Theranos. It protects all of my clients' information, it's secure, and that's the best thing. Skype and FaceTime and other measures of like video chatting are not always HIPAA compliant, which can provide some like legal implications.
Okay. And like, how are your sessions going if you can speak on them? Is it better, worse? Obviously, people are anxious right now. They're worried about a bunch of things going on. How are your sessions going?
I would say my sessions are going well. It is an adjustment. Well, I was already doing some virtual sessions even before this, but it is an adjustment for people who are used to coming into the office. There are pros and cons to both. So some of the pros of being able to go into the office is it provides some people like a designated space and a ritual or routine. So they know Thursdays at 1 o'clock, I go to my therapist's office. Maybe I go after that and get a coffee, and it becomes a part of their schedule. They have privacy, and it kind of becomes a safe haven. Sometimes with virtual sessions, or at least when we were transitioning, some of my clients who do not live alone were kind of struggling, like, where is my safe space? Some of them have found just going into their car is helpful, and it kind of provides that safe space, and it gives them the freedom. Another thing with like the virtual sessions that is a benefit is I have less no-shows.
Okay.
So sometimes, in the office, people can stay at work late or traffic happens or just things come up. And if my office is 25 minutes away and you kind of forget, it's hard to still make the session. But being virtual, if you forget, if it's within like 5 minutes, someone could just log in and they don't miss that much of their session. So I would say it's going better now. People are very thankful to still have access to me, and they've adapted well.
I bet. That's good to hear. I mean, as we all know or may not know, the Black community, I feel, is affected by this virus the most. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're less likely to seek, mental health, help from professionals like yourself. Mm-hmm. Are you, what are you seeing when it comes to your African-American or Black, clients when it comes to things that are happening right now?
Like I was mentioning earlier, and I know we had a poor connection, so I'll reiterate. I'm definitely finding that some of my clients are not that gracious with themselves, feeling like they should be handling it better, maybe should be like stronger than being impacted by, something like this. So definitely there's like stigma around strength and, like what we should be able to endure as Black people. And I say should loosely, as well as just stigma around mental health in general. So I think, in terms of like my clients, there's been a lot of talk around just giving oneself grace. Mm-hmm. And, this is uncharted territory. There is no blueprint for this. So giving oneself grace, acknowledging that it's okay to be scared. It's okay to not know what's happening. It's okay to just have some rough days. Like, it's okay to do that. So really just trying to equip them with tools to get through those rough days and, allowing them that mental maintenance that therapy provides.
Okay. Could you talk about like the tools that you're telling people to sort of utilize or do?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So it really depends, on each client, obviously, on what they're dealing with. But for instance, if a client is dealing with depression or noticing increased symptoms of depression, though it may be challenging, one of the most critical things is to just kind of push through it a little bit. So for instance, if I have a client who's struggling to just get out of the bed, we may make a small goal of just opening the blinds and maybe moving to the couch. And then, maybe up in the goal, like, okay, just, shower, like, just making tangible goals to still feel successful. Maybe push that does look like kind of pushing through and answering the phone for a friend or engaging in like a 10-minute conversation just to not isolate too much.
Yeah.
If I have a client who's dealing with increased anxiety, some of the things that we may talk about is like, okay, no more lists. Like, let's cut out lists for a while. I know you're used to wanting to control things and have everything organized and be ahead of it, but like, let's just cut lists for now. Maybe we'll do brain dumps instead. Yeah. So, you can like focus on the things that you have in your mind and get them out, but not in this like task-oriented way.
Yeah. All right. So Black folks, you hear that? Breathe easy. Take your time. Cut out the list. I mean, you spoke about just like moving around. How important is it to be physically active during this time and like to get outside and do something as far as exercise or fitness?
Physical activity is very important. And, having exposure to like sunlight, fresh air, all of those things truly have a positive impact on mental health. So for anyone who is able, to be physically active, to either get outside and get fresh air or be physically active within the home, I highly recommend it. It is extremely important. However, I do tell people, my clients especially, like, it's okay if you're not, running a half marathon right now, or if you're not even up to doing a yoga pose or a video. The goal is to be able to incorporate that physical activity, but not at the expense of mental health. So it's a sweet spot to find that balance between, knowing that physical activity improves mental health and encouraging that, but then not allowing oneself to like feel bad if they're not necessarily killing it in the physical activity arena.
Okay. Do you have any children as like patients that you're seeing right now? I know last week we had a couple of teachers that came on, and right now, children are being affected like this pandemic, just like everybody else, and physical activity, I feel like, is even more essential for them just to get outside. Can you speak to any of your experience with children and what they should be doing, or what you can tell parents right now for them?
Sure. So I actually do not see children in my private practice. In the past, I have worked with children, like in a school setting and in a community setting, but none of my clients at this time are children. Children are being impacted by this. And I think sometimes as adults, it's easy to, focus on how we're feeling and not realizing like this is a completely uncharted territory for children too. They don't have the consistency and routines that school provides. They're not able to see their friends and, family members who provide love and affection to them, and that whole like village that goes into raising a child. So again, I don't have children who are clients right now, but I would just say for parents, really trying to understand and empathize that children are having a tough time, seeing the changes that they are adapting to, like with schedule, with support systems, and just working to try to recreate that in the home as much as possible, being patient as much as possible, and giving the children the same grace that I'm asking that we give ourselves, which is not every day will be like the best day, and some days will be great days, and it's okay.
Yeah. All right. I feel like that's very important right now for people to just be okay with not feeling good, or be okay with being sad or depressed.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. I mean, so as far as I would say like looking at the media and watching the news and constantly trying to be updated on what's going on, would you suggest people like not watch the news as much, or schedule their days so they're not just like consuming information all the time that can maybe make them anxious?
Absolutely. I think that's very important to do. When I realized that I would be working through this, and honestly, I'm working a lot. My cases, my schedule has been very full. And it's just I'm thankful for since the beginning of this. So once I decided, like, okay, I'm going to be working through this time. I'm going to choose to, show up for my clients as much as possible, as best as possible. I had to turn off the notifications from like CNN and all of those things, even from my phone. I was like, there's no way that I can show up as my best self and read this all day.
Yeah.
So, I think it's very helpful to set those boundaries and say, okay, I want to be informed. So what I actually did, I switched to like a CNN like daily, just like email blast. So it's like I get like a snapshot of what's going on, but I don't get the constant notifications every 30 minutes. And so I think it's about finding balance of how can I stay informed, but not so much so that it's impeding my mental health, whether that looks like checking twice a day, whether that looks like not really checking that often. But it can be very daunting on one's mental health to constantly check the news when it's full of negative information.
Sure. I know, like, even with me trying to get informed, even prepping for this show every week, you're almost inundated with just constant negative stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, I feel like you work in the mental health space, and you're seeing a lot of patients and you're taking care of them, but I'm curious to know, what do you do for your mental health and wellness? If you don't mind.
Yeah, good question. No, I don't mind. Good question. So for sure, like one of the things I just mentioned early on, I cut the notifications. I was like, okay, this is a boundary I'm going to put in place just to protect my own peace of mind. I changed my schedule a bit. So I've kind of condensed my schedule as a way to protect my own mental health. I'm working less days, a little bit longer, but less days, so that I've kind of built in some off days, a series of off days in between, and just kind of, pour back into myself. Some days if the weather is nice, I'm in Detroit, so it hasn't gotten that warm yet. Some days are warm, but not really. But like if the weather is nice enough, I might go outside for a little walk or get some fresh air. And then definitely staying connected with my loved ones, not to the point where like it's draining, but just, enough to kind of check in and have some laughs. Another thing that I do is I limit the conversations around heavy topics when I'm talking to my friends. I try to just keep it lighthearted, talk about, fun. And I watch a lot of like comedies. So like, talking like fun TV shows or listening to music, things like that, things that make me feel good.
Okay, nice. I'm gonna take those pointers. I mean, even to speak on like my experience, I was seeing a therapist, I want to say on and off, for about like a year. The pandemic hit, I haven't been able to see him. So I have a two-part question for you. One,
okay.
what can people do that what can people do that have been seeing a therapist and now that they can't? Are there things that they can do to sort of substitute that? And I mean, as far as like the Black community is concerned, or anybody that doesn't necessarily have a job with insurance that provides them, mental health support, what can they do, or where can they reach out to sort of cope in this time?
Okay. So the first question about if someone was seeing a therapist before and they don't have access to, I would say reach out to that therapist, because maybe not every, therapist has had a chance to broadcast that they are taking virtual appointments at this time, but they may. So if you have access to like an email or a phone number, just send, hey, just wanting to, are you working through this time? Are you still taking appointments? And if so, you can continue with the established relationship. If not, there are some resources to find therapists. Psychology Today is a good one, and they are now highlighting which therapists are doing telehealth. Okay. So, just kind of looking for resources as normal. A lot of people in the field have switched to virtual. So it's much more accessible than it has been in the past. So, I would just send an email, send a number if you have a therapist you've been used to working with, or if you're looking for a new one. There are some ways to find those resources. Now, the second part of the question is if someone maybe does not have health insurance or access to mental health in that capacity, correct? That was the second part?
Correct.
So without health insurance, there are still a few options to get mental health services. Well, one, I would like to say for anyone who has lost their job due to COVID, that is considered a life change. So with that, many people may find that they're actually able to apply for the affordable care insurance, like just due to the life change. Okay. Another little tip that many people don't know, but you can actually apply for Medicaid year round. You don't have to wait for an open enrollment period for that. So if someone, meets the income requirements for Medicaid, they can apply for Medicaid coverage. If someone has Medicaid insurance, mental health services are free. There is no copay, there is no fee associated. So that's one avenue. But say, okay, if they're not able to apply for, Medicaid or any other form of insurance, there are certain organizations, like one is Open Path Collective, and they provide sliding scale rates. I believe it's like between $30 and $60. Mm-hmm. Also, many therapists may provide sliding scale rates. Just, again, reaching out and asking, but many therapists are willing to work with people whose income is impacted in general, but especially during a time like this. Mm-hmm. So seeing if they offer sliding scale. And then something that I also recommend for people who are paying for mental health out of pocket is maybe just reducing the visits. So instead of going every single week, maybe going every other week or even once a month. And that's helpful, better than like not going at all.
Okay. So when people actually, find or utilize these resources that you're speaking to, I've always been curious, how important is it to have a therapist that is your same ethnicity? A lot of times, like the first couple of tries when I went in to see a therapist, they weren't African American, and I definitely felt a difference. From your end, do you think that there's a huge difference when it comes to having a therapist and them being of your sex, gender, or race?
That's a good question. So to ask if there's a huge difference, I think it really depends on the individual. And it also depends on the presenting issue. So if someone is going in and like they feel that their presenting issue has cultural influence, then yeah, it would probably be really helpful to have a therapist who can understand those cultural aspects. In terms of specifically the Black community, there is so much stigma around mental health, how to treat it. Is it okay? What will people think? So I do find that most, Black clients or patients feel more comfortable with the therapist of color. Representation is important. That's pretty much the sole reason I went into the field. Like I wanted to be a familiar face. I wanted to take a role in that representation. So I think it's very important to just, feel seen, feel heard, and feel comfortable with one's therapist. If those aspects aren't there and that trust isn't there, it can really impede the therapeutic process.
Okay. So for those that are out there struggling right now and, they're not feeling well, they're anxious and their mental health is declining, or if they're questioning it, are there any symptoms or red flags that, people should look out for, whether that's, them looking at their own symptoms or family members or children?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the things that, one can look out for with either themselves or their loved ones. And some of these are tough because we're just in such an odd time. Like normally I would say eating too much or too little, sleeping too much or too little. Those would be like signs to look for. And they still are. But, during this time, it's a little harder to gauge like what's too much or too little, given the circumstances. But definitely paying attention to those things, increased use in vices, isolation, difficulty completing just like daily care tasks. So difficulty showering, difficulty feeding oneself, difficulty cleaning their living space. Those are all things to look out for. An increase in obsessive behaviors. So, you know, sometimes being like highly organized or, you know, like really, I don't know, like making sure everything's in this nice tight box can be helpful, but sometimes it's important to make sure it doesn't become obsessive, like for the need to control. So like that can be something. Also, if someone is starting to either like move too slowly or speak too slowly or too quickly to where their loved ones are starting to notice, like, hey, you know, you okay? What's going on? So just those types of changes in behavior would be good to look for now. Also, crying spells. Crying spells is a big one that's happening now. Just crying and not really knowing why, not being able to stop it,
Yeah.
and that happening more days than not. That's another sign.
Okay. Okay. I know you had mentioned isolation. I read an article the other day, and I don't know if this is, you know, accurate or not. They said that isolation could be equivalent, bad isolation or continued isolation could be equivalent to 15 cigarettes a day. Like for those that aren't around their family or they don't have roommates and they just live in their own apartment, you know, what can they do when it comes to isolation outside of, you know, calling somebody or getting on the phone? And how, you know, detrimental can isolation really be?
So I'm not familiar with the study that equates it to 15 cigarettes. I'm not sure about. I don't have, you know, I haven't read that one. But the isolation is that, you know, it can be very detrimental, and it can be one of those symptoms that kind of creep in and it's easy to pass off for something else. So it's like, oh, I'm just tired, or oh, work has me down. And, you know, time may pass and you realize like, man, I haven't really connected with loved ones in quite some time. So for people who are living alone during this time, one, just being aware, you know, being self-aware. Am I becoming more isolated? Am I declining all the calls, declining all of the Zoom, you know, conferences? Just kind of sitting in the dark, not turning on the lights, not opening the blinds, things like that. For people who are living alone, being able to just go outside, even though we have to social distance and we cannot be near others, sometimes just even seeing people interacting, whether they're driving, you know, walking down the street, whatever, can be helpful to remind us that we're not in this world alone. Living alone can feel that way. So, you know, just seeing other people engaging, and then being comfortable and or hopefully having a loved one that they can reach out to say, hey, I'm having a tough time. Like, I'm really having a tough time. You know, are you available? Do you have the capacity? And then trying to problem solve, like, is there any way that I could lean on you for support right now?
All right. All good information. All good information. We're going to wrap in a sec, but before I get to the next interviewee, is there any other words that you can tell our audience as far as, you know, coping in this time?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say some things to just keep in mind during this time. If you or anyone you know is feeling suicidal, or, you know, having like any thoughts of self-harm or harm to others, create a safety plan, reach out. There are hotlines, there are, you know, crisis teams available to help. That's first and foremost, because, you know, this is such a uncharted intervention toolbox. So with that same theory of using senses, but making sure that it's something that's pleasing. So it, you know, have something that like aromatherapy, having a diffuser or incense or candles prepared. So if I'm having a tough time, okay, let me light my favorite candle. Having a certain playlist or a certain style or genre of music that is particularly calming. So if I'm having a tough time, I'll put on some jazz today. Also being able to engage in sight. So whether it's like visualizing something that's really positive or engaging in like a funny show or something like that, that's helpful. And then sometimes even like sensory things are helpful and calming. So that could be something, you know, squishy, something like soft. Various sensory things can help with grounding. So I would say, you know, just trying to have like a preventative measure to, you know, for things that are pleasing. Be gracious with yourself. Meditation, deep breathing. Meditation doesn't always have to look like being still and just having no thoughts. Coloring, painting, drawing, journaling, any of those things can be meditative, because it allows one's mind to kind of become calm. And then lastly, just be easy on yourself. You know, this is no right way to do this. There's no perfect way to do this. We're just trying to get through it.
Okay, great, great, great. For our audience members, if they want to contact you or reach out, do you have any information that you can provide to them?
Sure, yeah. So I'm actually on Psychology Today, and what I can do is I can put my Psychology Today link in my IG profile. But I am on Psychology Today, Brittany Regina Thomas, LCSW, and Yeah,
All right.
I can be reached there. My email is there. My phone number is there. My DMs are open on IG, and I'm working on having some other ways of contacting me as well.
All right. Dope, dope, dope. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you. We appreciate you. We appreciate all the information.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. No problem. All right.
All righty. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, y'all. Just a reminder, we are still raising funds for the production and distribution of N95 masks to Brooklyn Hospital medical workers. So hit that link in the bio. Hit that link. We're almost at 2,000. All right. So I'm just going to see where the doctor is. Get to our next interview. Again, donate. Hit that link in the bio. Help us help these medical workers out. Just checking to make sure. Boom. Just waiting for the doc to get on. Yo, what's up, man?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. So please, for those who don't know, could you state your name, your occupation, and the work that you're doing? Speak on the experience.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Kweku Poku. I'm actually a senior psychiatry resident in London, Ontario, at the London Health Sciences Centre.
Okay.
And I take care of, I guess, the length and breadth of patients with psychiatric illness, but mainly the adult population.
Okay, great. So, let's get to it. Like, obviously, it's a crazy time that's going on right now. What are you experiencing? How are your patients coping right now? How are you treating them?
Yeah, so, generally, right now, COVID is affecting the entire society at large, right? At the hospital, I think the first thing you'll notice is that there's actually fewer patients, there's less volumes, and that's because a lot of people are actually avoiding going to the hospital because they're worried of getting COVID, which is understandable. What's concerning, though, is that there are folks out there who may have other health issues, for example, heart attacks, right, or strokes, who really do need to go to a hospital and are avoiding going to a hospital. There are folks struggling with mental illness, and if it gets to the point where it's serious enough, sometimes they just may be avoiding going to the hospital because they're worried about getting COVID, right? Because the anxiety level is so high. Now, in the actual emergency department, we're all geared up. We've got PPE. I think initially when the pandemic first started, we had troubles, but now we're kind of caught up and we're okay from that standpoint. But in terms of seeing my patients every day, I'm seeing them pretty much over teleconference now, either over the phone or telepsychiatry. And that allows me to stay engaged with my patients and also provide them the care that they need. And I find that I enjoy it because I'm able to stay in touch on a more frequent basis, and also able to engage them more frequently, which is nice.
All right, that's great. You said you're seeing adults via teleconferences. Are you seeing anybody within the hospital like that has been diagnosed with a mental illness that's been, taken into the hospital as a patient?
Yeah, so we have an inpatient unit that does manage folks who are admitted. Generally, we don't actually like to admit patients to the hospital because after a certain amount of time, being in the hospital can actually be counterproductive because ultimately we want you to be living your life. We want you to be surrounded by people who care about you. We want you to be in your natural element. And the hospital is a highly artificial environment used for the acute care of patients who are in acute crisis situations that may just need the hospital for that short period of time. Certainly there are some folks who have more extensive needs, and for those folks, they may need to be in the hospital for longer. In the inpatient units, we tried to keep the number of patients to a minimum to minimize interaction and to increase social distancing and physical distancing. Of course, with a lot of our patients, this can be quite difficult in practice, either because the effects of social distancing are quite, harmful to a person's mental health, or some may just not have the capacity to understand, social distancing. Just like, a 5-year-old, trying to get a 5-year-old child to social distance. Good luck with that, right?
Yeah. So, you're a psychiatrist, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're able to prescribe actual medication to people. It varies when it comes to people who need it and don't need it. Are you prescribing more medication, and what are like the signs that you would need to prescribe medication to somebody?
Yeah, so mental health, there's so much variability. I mean, my mental health illness is not the same as yours, it's not the same as, your brothers or your mothers. Everybody's different, right? And I think that understanding that every person is unique and that you have to take a unique approach is extremely important. So on the milder side, we actually prefer not to use medications, right? So, if you're still able to go to work, if you're able to stay engaged in your community, if you're still taking care of yourself, showering, eating, that kind of thing, we prefer to actually do something like talk therapy or psychotherapy, something that Regina, would be an expert on in terms of delivering and coordinating, group therapy, that kind of thing, something more conservative. Medications are reserved for folks that have more severe or more persistent mental illness, or sometimes you're in an acute crisis situation whereby you may need to take medications in the short term to bring you up to the level where you can actually participate in psychotherapy.
Okay. I mean, we spoke about, obviously, from this live show, speaking to the Black community. As far as like your patients are concerned, what are you seeing when it comes to the Black community and mental health during this pandemic?
So generally, where I'm at, we actually don't have a lot of Black folk coming in generally, just because there's not a lot of Black folks in the city, period. However, just to paint in broad strokes, what we do know is that Black folk don't access healthcare as often, and in particular mental health care as often. And the reasons for this are historical. There's historical and there's contemporary discrimination, both from individuals and institutions, and this has kind of left a bit of a sour taste in our mouth, so to speak. Trusting healthcare professionals can be difficult, right? At the same time, we may not have access to the same quality of care, and if we don't stand up for ourselves, if we're not assertive, we may fall by the wayside, which is important. Which is actually why I think it's important that more Black people go into medicine, more Black people go into healthcare, more Black people become allied health professionals, because then we can see the importance of advocating for ourselves, and sort of spread that message, to the community at large.
Okay, I feel like that's really important. That's really important as far as just Black professionals pushing into these industries, just to, be recognized and have people like me, be able to see a Black doctor and how important that is. As far as, assisting others outside of the professional space, like if I were to talk to somebody else, I was reading an article earlier and it said that, helping somebody else could help your personal mental health. Is there any truth in that, do you think?
Absolutely, 100%. I couldn't agree with that more. So oftentimes what happens when we're struggling with mental illness is that the focus turns inwards, right? And the focus can be quite dark. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is focus outwards. So focus on the people around you. Volunteering is extremely helpful in terms of distracting yourself from your lows and those dark periods. And it also can help you reframe, certain aspects of your life, be more appreciative of certain things, which can generate positive emotions and positive thoughts, and then also result in positive behaviors. So it's all good, from my perspective. I see it in my clinic. I see it in the research. I see it in day to day, right? Driving home, walking by people in the park. You see it, just an act of kindness, have a way of rippling around and making just everybody feel better generally.
Sure. Could you speak on any other measures that people can take or practices that people can take outside of seeking a professional, as far as, just decreasing the anxiety and, feeling better?
Right. So once again, I'll stipulate that it's highly dependent on the individual person and also what they're struggling with. But some general strategies, right? A healthy body contributes to a healthy mind, right? So exercising, right? Exercising is a powerful antidepressant. It's a powerful anti-anxiety. I mean, some people don't even need medications. They go out just for a short walk, right? 20-minute walk, 30-minute walk, something regular, something scheduled, something that gets them out of their house, right?
Yeah.
Now, it can be a bit difficult during this time, but you can still, practice social distancing or physical distancing while you're going out, right? Or wear a mask or something of that nature. Having a regular sleep schedule, having a regular schedule just generally is very helpful in terms of maintaining your mood and promoting wellness. It's also important to be open, right? To talk to people in our lives that we care about and that care about us. This may include our mothers, our fathers, our uncles, aunts, and close friends. Sometimes, depending on our social circumstance, depending on our lived experience, this may be very difficult to access. And finding new communities online can be very helpful as well.
Okay. Could you suggest any communities online that people can, go on and get that help?
So there's a massive number of communities you can go to. One caveat I'll say though is when it comes to finding community online, oftentimes support groups of people who've been in a similar situation can be helpful. So for example, if you have PTSD, finding a PTSD support group, right? If you have anxiety, finding an anxiety support group. So something specific to you from people who have been through what you've been through. Now, we have to be careful though in terms of some information that may be passed around. Some of it may be misinformation, some of it may be harmful even. So it's important to take everything with a grain of salt. But there's something about the camaraderie of just, knowing that somebody else has been through what you've been through, knowing that somebody else has succeeded in overcoming what you're struggling with. That can be empowering, that can be motivating, that can help you see a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak.
Okay, cool.
And in terms of resources generally, there's NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. They have a website that you can go to, and they'll have way more resources for folks who struggle with substance use, for example, alcoholism or opioids. There are online resources, online support groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. There's also support for families of people who struggle with this, right? So you could find all of this online. It's very easily accessible. And you can find something that is catered to you, that you find helpful, or you find appropriate.
Okay. As far as like what you're seeing, and I mean, it might go without saying, as far as people who did have addictions before, is there an increase in people, sort of abusing alcohol and abusing drugs right now? Are you seeing that from your patients at all?
So the data, the research at this time is very limited. We don't have a lot of information.
Okay.
What we do know is that the sales of certain items, for example, alcohol, has gone up at least 50%, right? Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that there's more people who are alcoholics. There's lots of people that drink that are not alcoholics, right? And you drink socially. You're not working, because of COVID, and you just need something to pass the time. Now, one thing I'll say during this time is that people wonder, why are the liquor stores why open? Why are we still able to get alcohol? Why are they essential services? And that's because there's some folks who are addicted and who will go through terrible withdrawals that can be actually life-threatening if they don't have access to that. So in a way, it's very much a harm reduction approach. Now, in terms of my personal experience in my clinic, I haven't necessarily seen an increase in the number of folks with addiction or substance use who are coming in crisis. But the longer this goes on, and we know this from past experience, the longer that this isolation goes on, the more of it we will see. Simply because ultimately we are social creatures, and being around other people is an extremely powerful sort of anti-anxiety, antidepressant, anti-whatever So.
We were talking about things that people consume, negative things, alcohol and and, you know, drugs and whatnot. But how important is it to have like a good diet right now, as far as just eating healthy food and drinking water every day? How important is that to your mental health?
So it depends on the person. You know, it can be insignificant to extremely important, right? Now, I mean, that doesn't really answer your question. What I can say generally is that, you know, eating healthy is important because it helps you stay healthy, right? And staying healthy, feeling good about yourself is an easy way to have stronger mental wellness, right? You know, it goes back to the whole mind-body connection. If the mind is strong, you know, there's a better chance that the body will be strong. If the body is strong, there's a better chance that the mind will be strong, right? And so there's an interplay that's complex that we don't quite understand, but that we see every day, right, as we live our lives. So, you know, having a good diet is important because it helps you maintain good health. And having good health is important because it helps you maintain both physical and spiritual well-being.
Sure. All right. I mean, you know, when we speak about the Black community, a lot of the time they don't necessarily have access to good food. You know,
right.
They live in food deserts and whatnot. And there's a lot of determinants when it comes to, you know, bad health within the Black community. And I know that's probably no different with mental health. They might not even have the access to a professional. Is there anything you can speak to as far as like telling those folks who don't really have, you know, the resources as far as mental health, what they can do?
So one of the most basic things that we can do in terms of having better mental health is first educate ourselves, right? So if we don't know what's happening, if we don't know why we're feeling down, if we don't know why we're feeling sad, if we don't know why we can't get out of bed that day, you know, it's important to do some research and to educate ourselves, or at least to find out, you know, where can I find, you know, credible, useful information. It's important to talk to the people around us. You know, about 50% of people in their lifetime will struggle with some kind of mental illness, so it's extremely common, right? And you know, I don't see these people because most people will get better, right? And it's important that you access your social networks, so your friends, your family. Some people find pets to be extremely therapeutic, you know, to help them with whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah.
As well as, you know, if it comes down to access, right, and finding a therapist in a cost-effective way, there are ways. So as Regina mentioned before, Medicaid, you can apply to Medicaid. Moreover, if you are near a teaching hospital or any facility that teaches mental health professionals, oftentimes you can get free mental health care if you are if a student is involved in your care. Now, you know, usually the student will be supervised, and you know, you can see them on a regular basis. And but the point is, you're getting, you know, free health care. From that perspective. As well, lots of psychologists, therapists will offer a sliding scale, as Regina mentioned before. So that's also important. The ultimate technique when it comes to low mental health, poor mental health, is distraction. What ends up happening with most of us is we end up in a funk because we end up focusing on the negative aspects of what's happening to us. You know, thoughts become things, basically, right? How we think influences how we feel influences our behaviors. So if we can distract ourselves from our thoughts, oftentimes what you see is that most people will find positive benefit and, you know, won't even need a mental health professional. So doing things like meditation, doing things like positive imagery, deep breathing exercises, grounding, some of the things that Regina mentioned before, these are free. These are, you know, very easily attainable. You can just go on YouTube and you know, have someone teach you how to do them. You know, you can read about them in magazines. It's all very highly accessible.
Okay. I mean, so as far as, you know, the ramifications of this pandemic, do you see it having like long-term effects on people from being isolated for this long?
Absolutely. Now, we may not necessarily see the effects right away as we're in the midst of it, but for one thing, the longer this goes on, the more mental health troubles you'll see. So we know already that the levels of domestic violence is going up. We know that we're starting to see perhaps the early signs of an uptick in terms of people taking their own life or attempting to take their life and not reaching out for help. Oftentimes, mental health struggles can lag behind the major event by weeks to months to even years, right? So trauma, this could all be very traumatic for people, and trauma may not rear its ugly head until much later, right? And people then start having negative alterations in their mood, nightmares and flashbacks. They start interacting with people differently. So this is all very traumatic. When we think of trauma, we like to think of getting into a car accident or going to being in a war zone. But you can be exposed to verbal abuse, chronically, which is traumatic, physical abuse, which is traumatic, emotional abuse, which is traumatic, right? Neglect, isolation. These are things that all be very traumatic, and their effects may not be seen right away. And it may take some time, which is why it's important to get ahead of it, right? So while we're busy flattening the curve, it's also important to get ahead of the curve when it comes to mental illness.
Okay. All good information. All good information. We'll get a wrap soon in a sec. I appreciate you, Dr. Poku, for coming on tonight. Is there any parting words that you can tell our audience just as far as moving forward during this time of crisis?
Yeah, one thing I'll say is that we like to think that there are people on the front lines, doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals. But I like to think that we're all on the front lines. The bus driver who's in contact with people that might have COVID, the custodian who's cleaning up after folks, the grocery clerk, even us folks who have to stay at home. We're making sacrifices, right? We want to be at work, but we can't go to work. So that's a sacrifice. We're having trouble paying our bills. We're all on the front lines. And I think that, the sooner we understand this, and the sooner we realize that this virus, it doesn't care about race, it doesn't care about class, it doesn't care, if you're young, if you're old, it'll come for you if you don't take the right precautions, right? Such as basic things such as washing your hands, wearing a mask. These two things alone, if we all did that, this thing could be snuffed out in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
Right. But the thing is, we all have to be on the same page, and I think that we have to take look at it as we're all trying to be patriotic, right? And I think the messaging has to be along the lines where it's patriotic to do these things, to socially isolate in the short term, to wear masks, to wash our hands, because this is what's going to save our collective countries, right? This is what's going to save the economy. This is what's going to allow us to get things back on track as quickly as possible. And we will get back on track. We've survived worse as a species. We survived worse. African Americans have survived worse than this. We shall overcome.
Good. I love to hear that. The information is very important. I thank you, Dr. Poku. From his mouth, reaching out to the Black community. We've been through this before. We can get through it again. And thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Have a good evening. Later. All right, y'all. That's another episode wrapped. Before we cut out, please hit the link in our bio. Help us get to 2,000 so we can help out these medical workers at Brooklyn Hospital. I thank everybody for tuning in this evening. I wish you all positive vibrations from the Stoop. Please stay safe out there, stay healthy, and stay strong. Peace.